Good morning, I'm Mr. Menthon. I'm the head of Challenge newspaper, and welcome for this second day of the Common Good Summit in Toulouse. We will be talking about the future of urban transport. And I'd like to ask Marc Terbaldi, who is the professor at the Toulouse School of Economics, is one of our hosts, to get the ball rolling and talking about the urban transport, because it may come from afar for people who are commuting into the city. What does that mean? Could you please tell us what it means to urban transport today for the city, and what about tomorrow? That's a very important program, and just to launch the debate. Well, good morning to everybody, and I'm very pleased to be having my things to say about urban transport. We're talking about the city here because the city is the place where the production is occurring. To give you an image, we are saying, according to statistics of some time ago, that 50% of the gross national product of the states was produced over 2% of the territory of the states. That gives you an idea of the magnitude. And why? Well, the economists have highlighted what we call the so-called agglomeration effects, because there in the city you can produce this. And these effects are essential if you want to have growth. And I hope that the word that I'm using is not considered as ugly words. What about these effects? Well, the city enables to have lower costs of transport, and it enables an exchange of information which is of a greater magnitude, and it leads to a better training of all the technologies and information, and it also enables to have a better match between the features and the skills of all the workers and the technological features of the companies. Now, these effects are very important because, in the history, in terms of causality between what is the growth, it's not by having a road or by having a high-speed train that you are going to produce growth. It's only because we have cities that are powerful, cities that enable these effects to take place, and that's why you have growth. And this is why we develop transport as a result. So this is a fairly complicated causality, but I think this is one of the major discovery of the economist, with Koopman in particular, highlighting these so-called metropolitan or agglomeration effects. Now, these effects will create their own economies. It will lead to bottlenecks. Unfortunately, there will be some traffic jams on the ring roads, and either in the city of Paris or Toulouse. And also there will be some problems with the public transport because you are tightly located within the bus, and to go from one destination to another. So, of course, you have to meet these challenges, and so this is going to cost us a lot, because daily we have computed with the city of Toulouse, and I want to use, if I may, the example of the city that I know well, because I've been working on that city. Each day when you commute to the city, you are going to spend €1 more by using this car, because a metro ticket is about 1.70 cents, €1.70. So you do not understand that you are paying €1 when you are stepping into your car, but you are still paying it, and it's about 200 million euros that are lost in terms of wealth and in terms of capability to develop production or various types of production, should I say. So this is the point that I wanted to highlight. Now, what are the solutions? There are many, actually. And this is the main issue of urban transport in terms of future transport. So what are the possible solutions? Well, I'm going to mention a few, but there are others as well. I'm just thinking about the most important ones. First of all, what we call the mobility as a service, acronym MaaS. Now, the functional integration of the various modes of transport, because we are also talking as well about intermodality. And behind that word, you have the interoperability issue. And these notions are fairly sophisticated, but in particular, if you want to have various modes of transport operate well, and these modes of transport are produced and operated by a number of companies and various operators, what you want to do, you want to exchange data. And the main challenge here is that we're talking about the European directive SML at the European level associated with the IMA directive. So this is sharing data. This is a very important element in this equation. And behind that, shall we accept, or rather, what is the best solution? I'm going to take, for example, is it going to be Amazon providing all the mobility services from the car to the metro? Are we going to select Google or Amazon? They may be competing in various cities. Or shall we have a public service? And therefore, we could share the data in a different manner. So is this going to be the role of the state to handle these data? Second solution, which seems absolutely necessary because there's a consensus between the various economists on this issue. This is the implementation of urban tolls in the major metropolises. Now, a city like Toulouse, with a greater metropolis, that's 4 million trips per day. Now, if you commute every day and then you may have 10 trips per week. If you do a little computation, or if you have a very small tax of about €2.50 per day per week, 4 weeks, 10 euros, 120 euros per year. Now, based on that particular calculation, this urban toll is going to produce something like 200 million euros per year. Coming back to your initial figure, which is effectively, this is congestion. This is the equivalent to congestion. And this is why this figure is important, because over 10 years, it's about 2 billion. And this represents 2/3 of the investment cost for the third metro line in Toulouse, which is one of the longest. I just would like, yes, well, we have some practitioners. What about the third solution? Well, I'm not going to develop this third solution because in Toulouse, we have the new modes of transport. I don't want to develop this because the others are going to talk about it. So there are various modes that can be envisaged for the inhabitants. In Toulouse, we have just inaugurated the first cable car for transport, and this is a very ecological, minded solution. But I'm thinking about all the modes of transport that should be developed in order to facilitate or to make the transport of goods easier in the city. And of course, I'm very much in favor of the use of drones. I believe that's the solution because these are also developed in Toulouse by one of our major companies which is located close to Blagnac. Now, these are three solutions, and urban tolls, new modes of transport, and the interoperability. These are the three solutions, but you have been teasing us well, and we are very fortunate because we have very important actors in terms of mobility. Cécile Prévieux, she's the NG manager in charge of the solutions and services, so including mobility solutions and the various sources of propulsion in terms of mobility, hydrogen, gas. We'll talk about that. Thierry Mallet, who's the head of Transdev, an important transport actor, author of a book that I would like to recommend, which is very pedagogical about the trip to the heart of mobility. This is the title of his book, published with the Cherche Midi company, and talking about interoperability, and there we have a very special precise vision. And then also you talked about this twice, and we have the head of Amazon France, Mr. Duval. Thank you for being with us. Thierry, could you please get started on your book? You talk a lot about urban centers, but you also talk about pools of activity. But when we talk about Toulouse, are you referring to the city, to the metropolis, or are you referring to all those who are working in Toulouse or and living in the suburbs 40 kilometers away? Well, thank you, Pierre-Henri. I just would like to progress in the rationale of the common good, because the object of public transport is to have a social cohesion, to have an economic development, and also, as we will see in the debate, it's a very important factor in terms of ecological transition. So I'd like to start with a number of important elements, because sometimes we focus a lot on the city center and we forget about the objectives. I'd like to share a number of figures with you, because in France today, the tool to move daily is the car, right? And when the 83% of the kilometers are done with a car, and public transport is about 11%, more or less. Shared transport, walking is 3%, and the bike is 1%. These are 2019 figures. It gives you an overview. Now, the car versus the public transport, this is a very constrained choice. Due to the crisis, people are taking more the public transport. Due to the cost of gasoline, we haven't had more. There hasn't been an increase in public transport, but part of the population is not using them. Well, there are places like what we call the pools of life. Well, daily commuting is 50% of all the trips. So. It's between the place where you live and the place where you work, and this is 50 kilometers more or less on average. So we are focusing the offer on the heart of the metropolis, but you have to look at the suburbs as well, because this is where the issue is. And people in the suburbs are taking their cars and bring it back to the city center. And out of 3 cars in the city, 2 are coming from commuters. So it's very important to work at the right scale with the life pool and life basin, and urban transport will be excluding solutions, because we can see as the carbon tax, which will not enable us to be efficient in public transport if there isn't any alternative. And as of today, it's very important to work at this particular scale, which is in order to find solutions that exist, in order to serve all the peripheries and to have a denser network. And so this is where our issue is, because the urban emissions is 60% due to the cars, and globally, transport is 30% of the emissions, and individual cars is 16% nationally, and you have 30% for the great distance, 10% for the rural, and 60% for the urban areas. And this is where we have to focus our effort. It's not very simple, because we are leaving the territory of the metropolis of Toulouse, Lyon, Bordeaux, and then we are on a territory which is about 50 kilometers away. And it has accelerated with the concentration of jobs metropolis. And in order to work in these metropolises, these people have decided to live in the suburbs. So that was the notion of life basins. And we have to take this into account in order to look at the social aspects and to reduce green gas effect emissions. So we'll have to come back to the tolls because it concerns mainly the cities. So we'll see how, Mr. Eric Duval, you are the. There's a great expectation with Amazon, and we know that there are small vans delivering parcels, and we know that this is a major concern for Amazon. So you have publicly displayed the objectives that are extremely ambitious in terms of net zero carbon. Now, I'd like to know what the situation is for you, and very briefly, we are placing a lot of expectations on drones, and you have published on that, and I think personally it may look like a gadget, but apparently this is not, because you have an academic ambition. You have the... well, thank you to give me the floor, and I'm very pleased to be attending this very interesting summit. Yes, the protection of the environment is one of our foundation pillars, co-created with another company. We want to have net zero carbon in the company by 2040, 10 years before the Paris agreements, and we have 300 companies working with us that have co-signed. Among them, many French companies like Schneider and others. And today, it's about 8 million employees that are developing objectives in order to have a net zero carbon company. So as a result, we are the first private purchaser of renewable energy for us. And we want to develop projects. We have 2 projects. One will start. So you are yes, we are producing renewable energy. We have a center which will be starting in Gironde for 15 megawatts as early as 2022, and another one in the Aude department in 2025 with 20 more megawatts. So that will be available in 2025. So in all this problematic, the Amazon company and other companies have this concern to try and remove all carbons from their supply chains. And if I were to start on that, I'd like to say that, and to answer your question as well, the transport is a problem. 83% of people are using their cars, and the city centers are congested, as you know, and then what we want to do is to decongestion the city center. We can see that these vans are individual transport vehicles. 1 kilometer with a delivery, it's about 4 to 9 kilometers of vehicles that are not going to pollute. And if we reason, if we think about what the congestion would be if we were to ask Frenchmen to go and get their mail at the post office, that would be really havoc. So, of course, the company has been, the society has been organized to bring the mail at home with the factor, with the postman. So the delivery at home is exactly the same principle. It's a mutualized delivery of public transport at home. And in this particular sense, it's already more virtuous than the traditional way of operating. So we'll have to look at the academic aspects. I don't know whether you've worked on this, Mark, on the net carbon. What about our white vans? They are still polluting. What is your program? Do you have alternatives? You were talking about the drones. Yes. As of today, we can do even better than that, because the net zero carbon principle of the supply chain using electric delivery means or soft mobility means is very important, and we are doing this at high speed, because in Paris at the moment all of the Parisian area 2/3 of our deliveries are made using a zero-emission vehicle. So your objective is zero emissions by 2030. In 2040, we should be totally carbon-free. And also with a progress, intermediate progress in 2025, in 3 years' time, we will be operating only with renewable energy. And in 2030, we'll have 50% at the world level of all the deliveries that will be net zero carbon. So in France, we are moving ahead more quickly because in Paris, we are already at 2/3 of our deliveries that are done with the soft mobility. We started in Toulouse with a company which is called Sans Geste. You may know this company, and today the whole city centre is using this mode. We are pulling together all the means available and with our services to make sure that we are using our associates' buildings in order to start from that, and then and deliver with vans. What about the drones? Well, drones, that's a very good idea, but I like things to be at scale. So if you want to work with for all the consumers and then provide all the continuous and ecologically minded deliveries, I want to have other types of deliveries. Sorry, Marc Baldi, this is not a priority to use the drones for Amazon. But for public transport, well, maybe if you are in the countryside, maybe it will be more adapted. I don't know. So you are the head of ENGIE. You are also producing energy just like Amazon, and you are producing more than Amazon because this is the core of your activity as ENGIE. You are also producing all sorts of energy, and you are also in charge of the service solutions at ENGIE. What is the good mix in terms of electrical vehicles on the one hand? At Transdev, they are using all sorts of lorries and trains and diesel operated and gas operated, hydrogen operated vehicles. What is your mix? What sort of solutions in terms of urban mobility for you at ENGIE? What is most adapted in terms of individual or collective transport for the delivery of parcels? What is your own experience? What sorts of things have you been tested at ENGIE in the various metropolises? Well, first of all, I'd like to come back to this major moment of zero carbon in transports, because this is supported in the urban areas and supported by the national and European directives. And you know that the European Union has implemented a number of rules about new vehicles emissions and taxes for these vehicles as of January 2021, leading to have a greener vehicle, light vehicles, a lot of electric vehicles for all the manufacturers, and also we suppress by 2035 the all thermal operated machines by 2035, and in the cities as well. And in France, we have a law with low emission zones for more than 150,000 inhabitants. This is the size, and leading the leaders, municipal leaders, to make drastic decisions to move to that. And in UK as well, there are laws about dwellings enabling all the buildings to be renovated, to have electric terminals at the foot of the tertiary or residential buildings. And this is a very important moment for net zero carbon. And what are the other solutions that can be brought in order to have a clean transport? First of all, you need the infrastructures. We know that it's the chicken and the egg dilemma. You can only have an electric vehicle if you can find a terminal to recharge the battery and not to be leaving it for an hour and a half, as is the case today. And also you cannot pay the charge with your banker's card, although it's not true everywhere. However, it should be a very simple solution, just like a thermal operated vehicle. You go to the pump, petrol station, and you can refuel very quickly, and it's very easy to do, and should be the same thing tomorrow for all these green solutions. So first thing, we can see that a light vehicle is definitely electric, because this is to be massively taking the market over, and the electric, it's even for the logistic transport for the last kilometer before delivery, in order to have limited the distance in terms of autonomy, and then afterwards you can see that on heavier transport, I'm thinking about the buses, for example, like urban buses, or also dumpsters, or you do not see them every day. But then we are using gas-operated vehicles. Either biofuels are used with a liquid gas, or it could be hydrogen as well, because we have the first fleet that are operating for the dumpsters or buses operated like that. Why should we use gas operated vehicles? Because these are heavy vehicles with a very powerful capability, and they are very easily recharged, and with these solutions, given the distance, they have to cross a number of kilometers. So this is the preferred way. We still have some electric buses, but also the bus using liquid gas seems to be the best solution. 2 words. What about your buses? How are they operated by 2040? There are 2 classes here. There are 2 types of situations. In urban, there's an acceleration towards the electric vehicles, because we had some buses using gas, but we are moving to the electric. At Transdev, we have 1,800 vehicles in the world, and the last operation, we launched simultaneously 400 electric buses for the city of Bogota in Colombia. So it's across the board, all over the world. So you can see that there are buses that are gas operated, and I think that the energy mix is very important, particularly for long distances where you cannot bring the bus back to the station to recharge it, like and so the bus is the place where, or whether you have a bus or another type of bus where you are seated there, you have gas-operated solutions, and also, as you've just said, hydrogen. We have about 50 hydrogen powered vehicles, and it remains a solution which is being developed. It's very expensive, whereas the electric is just at the cost of diesel. Before the crisis, it's about the same in terms of price, which is not the case for hydrogen. Thank you. And what I've retained as well is that we have solutions that are for Bogota that are net zero carbon, and we often think about opposing the north and the south of the world, and thinking that the southern metropolises are the most polluted. What about the pressure? Are they obliged to find solutions? Just like the call for tender in Bogota? I think we'll have to take a first question regarding for you, Marc Abaldi, and I'd like to also have the opinion of the others here. Have we miles for a city not to be exceeded? Like the French authorities have pushed for the creation of major metropolises. Was it clever, or on the other hand, are there any other solutions? What is your opinion concerning this topic for transport? Is there a critical size? Well, yes, a lot of theoretical research has been conducted, and from the empirical side, it's more complicated, because what we have found is that one of the constant is that the structure of the city is organized in such a way, and the location of the activities and inhabitants is such that, on average, trips are about 30 minutes long. You may take any city in the world, and it seems to be a constant. This is what we have observed. So then after that, you shouldn't take a city as such. You have to take a city like Paris that has to be broken down in smaller areas. And it's this idea of this notion of 30 minutes is very important. And this is the most important. Is that a universal law? Or is it more mobile in the States? Well, no, you find this particular duration in all areas. It has moved a little bit, but you're right. With the remote working that has been generalized, that is part of our way of working now with the pandemic, things have been moving slightly, but that would be my answer. Yes, Thierry would like to say a word as well regarding the 30-minute duration rule. Well, it has to be looked at in a very reserved way, because today it can be applied with very strong disparities that because the rich are doing less kilometers and the poorer people will do more kilometers. It's it's not 1 hour duration for your trip in Paris. In Paris, it's about 1 hour and a half. In Los Angeles, it's about 2 to 3 hours of duration of trips. So this is a rule that can be applied locally, but not universal. It depends on the territories. There's a degradation at the moment because there's more congestion in the cities, and behind that there's the urban, the city planning problem, because you can take Singapore with 500,000 inhabitants, one per. Well, you have in Singapore, for example, restrictions. You cannot have a car if you haven't got a driving license, for example. So it's extremely constrained. And then you have a public transport. This is a state city covering the whole territory with a system which is extremely efficient going all over the place. So this universe has been designed for public transport, and as a result is providing city planning has been very well managed, and we can see that countries like Norway have tried to have dwellings less than 3 kilometers from a station, with a railway station, with a true service, with trains coming all throughout the day, and it's working in that particular instance. There's a major issue with the design of the city. It's the design of the suburbs and mastering this, and then you can be efficient. But you will not do away with a car. It's 80%. Even in the Netherlands, 75%. But if we were to lower it a little bit, and if they were to choose between the car and the public transport, that would be a great advantage. Now, liberty is not the car. The true liberty is to be able to do things without the car, and many people do not have this choice.
This topic has not at all been discussed during the latest electoral campaign. This is amazing, actually. I like to go back to the optimal size of cities. It makes me think of Coluche, the French humorist, who used to say the proper length for your length is the one you have, which helps you to have your feet on the ground. Quotes and quotes. So, exactly in the same way, in the e-commerce sector, in order to optimize deliveries, you have to bring parcels to warehouse, which are pooled with other companies, and then you take on board you take the next step, and you deliver your parcels to the client. And I think it's a matter of organization, with an appropriate type of organization, well-tailored type of organization. You can deliver at 24 hours, but it's all a matter of organization and of facilities, as mentioned by the other speakers. Concerning The charging points, for instance, I'd like to ask a question. What about the part played by public authorities, public powers, the towns, regions, the group of small cities, etc.? What about the part to be played by these authorities in terms of charging points? Is it up to these authorities to do it, or is it rather up to private players? There seems to be a preference for the public powers, public authorities being in charge of the setting up of charging point networks. Well, we are lagging behind in France. The goal was 100,000 charging points by the end of 2021. We won't reach this goal before 2023 of just 50,000 charging points today. We have over 800,000 electric vehicles available these days in France. What about the regulation in this matter? The state is in charge of major French roads and, of course, of the motorway, parking stations, rest areas, etc. And there is an obligation for these areas to have charging points. Now, the groups of small cities in France, what we call les communautés de communes, and the regions are also entrusted with this mission, that is helping these charging points to be disseminated over the territory. And this has been done in Strasbourg, in the Strasbourg area. They had 180 charging points. Now they want 1,000 charging points, and this includes all the small cities around Strasbourg, let's say center, and the center of Strasbourg. And we work together with all the mayors of these cities around Strasbourg. And you can have several types of charging points, slow charging points, that would be or quick charging points, especially, for instance, on supermarkets and hypermarkets, car parks. We have something we call concession de service, which means a kind of service delegation. That means the public area is will be dedicated during 10 or 15 years to the installation and of these charging points. Some charging points which were already available some years ago are now getting totally obsolete, and they have to be replaced. And we badly need refurbishing, or rather renewing and buying new charging points. You have an insight into the state of the art. I mean, there is progress. Progress is underway in this respect. At Amazon, have you got your own network, or do you talk with the metropolis conurbations concerning this matter? Of course, we are working on this. As I said, our fleet of vehicles is going electric quite quickly. And taking the example of Toulouse and Toulouse conurbation, we develop charging points on and around our buildings. We are doing it ourselves, yes. And what about the situation with you, in your bus company? Well, most buses have got a fraction of network charging, the bus stops and recharges. Then we have got night charging at our depots. So we have we can even have a very large size depot up to 40,000 square meters, and to be able to charge all the buses. And we could even envisage opening our depots and make them available to the public for people to charge their own private vehicles. The main challenge is not really charging or recharging. The main challenge is the power. Availability of power. Might be good to live next to a bus depot. Amazon is doing this. It's charging overnight in collaboration with another operator by pooling for bus RATP bus company areas or spaces. We can pool the recharge. This is available in Paris. It could be available in other cities, I'm sure, in the future. We know that land is scarce, and that's one of the land is scarce, especially in urban areas, in the urban centers, and this is really an issue. Now, urban tolls is something I would like to comment again. Don't you think that the introduction of SFE will become a kind of problem due to the exclusion phenomenon? Politicians prefer to make drastic decisions. And the ZFE, that is to say these zero-emission zones, ZFE in French, zero-emission or low-emission zones, is quite specific. And in my introduction, I mentioned the low amount tax, 0.2025 centimes of euro per journey to be paid by the car drivers. This means a real amount at the end of the year. And these amounts should be targeted and managed by an independent entity which could use the money cashed in to develop public transport, and could also use it to build new needed infrastructures. When you are obliged to take a car, it's just because you don't have any public transport available which can render the same service. Yeah, 83% people drive a car. And if you are very optimistic, we could go down to 60%. Well, let's be realistic. The car will still be there, and it's easy to use. What we have to do is to develop public transport as close as possible from the inhabitants. And near, you have to make them available near the inhabitants in the catchment areas. And Mr. Ivaldi, you privilege the toll you have described rather than the low emission zones or zero emission zones, the ZFE. I mean, what can be efficient is car parks in the suburbs. We have got some in Paris area. But I'd like to take the example of Bordeaux. Prior to the COVID, we opened a new bus line, which got started, so to speak, just before the COVID outbreak. But so cars can be parked in a given spot at the bus stop, and then people take the bus to go to the city center. This is a huge emission gain, so to speak. And instead of having 1,000 cars driving from the outskirts to the city center, you just have 20. But there are a lot of buses, and this car park is about 30 kilometers away from the city center, and you take a bus which takes you to the first available station. We have got such a car park 50 kilometers away from the city center, and it's quite popular. If you have got a bus available every other 4 or 5 minutes, there is no problem whatsoever for the passengers, because they don't have much waiting time, and there is no rupture, there is no interruption in their journey. So the car remains one possible solution, or a partial solution, and next the bus becomes the other partial solution. So the car is part of the solution, mustn't be the only solution. And these examples clearly illustrate this. Another question: when living in urban centers with well-serviced areas, don't you think it might be wiser to ask people to go to what we call relay points to get their parcel, than having so many vehicles deliver the parcels at home? The question is for urban centers. Well, you might well say, should we give the choice to the customer, to the end customer, that is between being delivered at home, going to relay points to get the parcel? There are approximately 25,000-30,000 delivery points in France in 2022. And I'm quite in favor of this solution, but that means these relay networks have to be very well organized, and 10% of our parcels are delivered to these relay points when it comes to Amazon. Since you are managing the pricing, it's not a matter of pricing at all. I mean, you give the choice to the customer. You can pay more, and then you get your parcel at home. In any case, the van drives downtown and can either deliver the parcels to the relay point or to the people's house or flat. It all depends on people's life. People prefer to go to the relay point, but in any case, our vans have to deliver the relay points. And I think we have to leave the choice and to give a wide choice to the customers. Now, turning to hydrogen. It's of great interest to the population and to the state. The state is going to dedicate 3 billion euros to develop this new tech. Is it a long-term solution? Do you bank? Are you banking on it at NG? Well, it's still experimental, isn't it, at Transdeb? Does NG invest largely in this tech? We are working on green on green electricity, and that's part of our core activity. And hydrogen is widely used in industry, so we have to think of the future and make the hydrogen usages green. There are also subsidies to develop electrolyzers, and the amount is 10 kilos per euro for hydrogen, exactly the same price as 1 liter of diesel fuel at the petrol station. There are a lot of projects in the pipeline. I mentioned Pau in the Pyrénées-Atlantic. They have got a lot of buses running thanks to and with hydrogen. We have got a project in progress in Toulouse concerning airport logistics supply with hydrogen. There are also some projects for dumpsters in Dijon and some projects concerning hydrogen buses. So we are working on a conversion. When it comes to lighter vehicles, there are several projects too, with Renault, for instance, with the Renault car company. But the result is that prices are much higher, and there is also kind of a networking problem. So we are working quite a lot and making progress in the Haut-Rhin region. Strong commitment by regional players to develop a lot of hydrogen stations for heavy or light vehicles in order to share usage and to optimize the use of these stations. So it's a real laboratory, actually, to see what can be done and to see if we can really make the system profitable. So if I summarize, you work a lot on heavy vehicles. Yes, indeed, but we may also do the same for light vehicles if we can have a real meshing and networking of stations, hydrogen stations. Well, for delivery, as far as delivery vans are concerned, we have opted for soft mobility for the last delivery mile or kilometer. Whereas for intermediary transport, we are we have started exploring several solutions. Barge transport, hydrogen transport, so much so that in 2040 we are ready, fully ready. One last word. What about the contribution of urban transport to carbon emissions? Is it really huge or just secondary? Well, huge contribution, I would say. Urban transport means 35% gas emissions. And if we take urban transport, 65% of urban transport is represented by cars. So I'm not going to say that train is not quite good, but the real issue and the real question is that instead of perhaps encouraging other solutions, we should invest largely, massively invest in cars. If we compare the transport sector and other sectors of activity, we must admit that there are not enough investments in the car sector, in the car industry. That's a real challenge. So we have invited operators, transport operators, logistics operators. Next year we will invite car manufacturers or bus manufacturers. We are about to round up this session, and we'll have a next session on digital issues in a few minutes.